Now back to the Robert Mueller hearing on KIDO Talk Radio.
The special counsel, that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when a regulation uses the word shall provide, does it mean that the individual is in fact obligated to provide what's being demanded by the regulation or statute, meaning you don't have any wiggle room, right?
I'd have to look more closely at the statute.
Well, I just read it to you. Okay. Now, volume 2, page 1, your report boldly states we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. Is that correct?
I'm trying to find that citation, Congressman.
Director, could you speak more directly into the microphone, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, it's volume 2, page...
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
It's volume 2, page 1. It said we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment.
Yes.
That's right in the beginning. Now, since you decided under the OLC opinion that you couldn't prosecute a sitting president, meaning President Trump, why did we have all of this investigation of President Trump that the other side is talking about when you knew that you weren't going to prosecute him?
Well, you don't know where the investigation is going to lie, and the OLC opinion itself says that you can continue the investigation even though you are not going to indict the president. Okay,
well, if you're not going to indict the president, then you just continue fishing. And that's my observation. Sure you. My time is limited. Sure, you can indict other people, but you can't indict the sitting president, right?
That's true.
Okay. Now, there are 182 pages in raw evidentiary material, including hundreds of references to 302, which are interviews by the FBI, for individuals who've never been cross-examined and which did not comply with the special counsel's governing regulation to explain the prosecution or declination decisions reached. Correct?
And where are you reading from on that?
I'm reading from my question.
Then could you repeat it?
Okay. You have 182 pages of raw evidentiary material with hundreds of references to 302s who were never been cross-examined and which didn't comply with the governing regulation to explain the prosecution or declination decisions reached.
This is one of those areas which I declined to discuss.
Okay, then
and would direct you to the report itself.
Okay. Well, I looked at the 182 pages of it. Let me switch gears. Mr. Shabbat and I were on this committee during the Clinton impeachment. Now, while I recognize that the independent counsel statute under which Kenneth Starr operated is different from the special counsel statute, he, in a number of occasions in his report, stated that the President Clinton's actions may have risen to impeachable conduct, recognizing that it is up to the House of Representatives to determine what conduct is impeachable. You never used the term raising to impeachable conduct for any of the 10 instances that the gentlewoman from Texas did. Is it true that there's nothing in Volume 2 of the report that says that the president may have engaged in impeachable conduct?
Well, we have studiously kept in the center of our investigation our mandate, and our mandate does not go to other ways of addressing conduct. Our mandate goes to developing the report and turning the report into the Attorney General.
With due respect, it seems to me, that there are a couple of statements that you made, that said that this is not for me to decide, and the implication is that this is for this committee to decide. Now, you didn't use the word impeachable conduct like Starr did. There was no statute to prevent you from using the word impeachable conduct. And I go back to what Mr. Radcliffe said, and that is that even the president is innocent until proven guilty. My time is up.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be a Democrat. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. the Democrat from Tennessee interviewing Robert Mueller.
And I thank you.
Sure.
Based upon your investigation, how did President Trump react to your appointment as special counsel?
Again, I send you the report for where that is stated.
Well, there is a quote from page 78 of your report, volume 2, which reads, when Sessions told the president that a special counsel had been appointed, the president slumped back in his chair and said, quote, oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm effed, unquote. Did Attorney General Sessions tell you about that little talk?
I'm not.
Director, please speak into the microphone.
Oh, surely. My apologies. I am not certain of the person who originally copied that quote.
Okay, well, Sessions apparently said it, and one of his aides had it in his notes, too, which I think you had, but that's become record. He wasn't pleased. He probably wasn't pleased with the special counsel, and particularly you, because of your outstanding reputation.
Correct.
Prior to your appointment, the Attorney General recused himself from the investigation because of his role in the 2016 campaign. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Recusal means the Attorney General could not be involved in the investigation. Is that correct?
That's the effect of recusal, yes.
And so instead, another Trump appointee, as you know Mr. Sessions was, Mr. Rosenstein became in charge of it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wasn't Attorney General Sessions following the rules and professional advice of the Department of Justice ethics folks when he recused himself from the investigation?
Yes.
And yet the president repeatedly expressed his displeasure at Sessions' decision to follow those ethics rules to recuse himself from oversight of that investigation. Is that not correct?
That's accurate based on what is written in the report.
And the president's reaction to the recusal is noted in the report. Mr. Bannon recalled that the president was mad as Bannon had ever seen him, and he screamed at McGahn about how weak Sessions was. Do you recall that from the report?
That's in the report, yes.
Despite knowing that Attorney General Sessions was not supposed to be involved in the investigation, the president still tried to get the Attorney General to unrecuse himself after you were appointed special counsel. Is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, your investigation found that at some point after your appointment, quote, the president called Sessions at his home and asked if he would unrecuse himself. Is that not true?
It's true.
Now, that wasn't the first time the president asked Sessions to unrecuse himself, was it?
I know there were at least two occasions.
And one of them was with Flynn, and one of them was when Sessions and McGahn flew to Mar-a-Lago to meet with the president. Sessions recalled that the president pulled him aside to speak alone and suggested he should do this unrecusal act. Correct?
Correct.
And then when Michael Flynn, a few days after Flynn entered a guilty plea for lying to federal agents and indicated his intent to cooperate with that investigation, Trump asked to speak to Sessions alone again in the Oval Office and again asked Sessions to unrecuse himself. True?
I refer you to the report for that.
Page 109, volume 2. Thank you, sir. Do you know of any point when the president personally expressed anger or frustrations at Sessions?
I'd have to pass on that.
Do you recall, and I think it's at page 78 of volume 2, the president told Sessions, you were supposed to protect me. You were supposed to protect me, or words to that effect.
Correct.
And is the Attorney General supposed to be the Attorney General of the United States of America or the consigliere for the president?
United States of America.
Thank you, sir. In fact, you wrote in your report that the president repeatedly sought to convince Sessions to unrecuse himself so Sessions could supervise the investigation in a way that would restrict its scope. Is that correct?
Rely on the report.
How could Sessions have restricted the scope of your investigation?
Well, I'm not going to speculate. If he, quite obviously, if he took over or was Attorney General, he would have greater latitude in his actions that would enable him to do things that otherwise he could not.
On page 113, you said the president believed that an unrecused Attorney General would play a protective role and could shield the president from the ongoing investigation. Regardless of all that, I want to thank you, Director Mueller, for your life of rectitude and service to our country. It's clear from your report and the evidence that the president wanted former Attorney General Sessions to violate the Justice Department ethics rules by taking over your investigation and improperly interfering with it to protect himself and his campaign. Your findings are so important because in America, nobody is above the law. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman for
And there we have it, another Democrat. We'll go to the Republican. And as you're listening to this on KIDO Talk Radio, you're hearing the different tone and tenor, especially with Robert Mueller. With the Republicans, he seems uncooperative, and he asks them to repeat the questions. With the Democrats, he seems to be, well, we'll let you decide. Once again, here's the Republican, Congressman Chabot.
Strategy had to change. Now they allege that there's plenty of evidence in your report to impeach the president, but the American people just didn't read it. And this hearing today is their last best hope to build up some sort of groundswell across America to impeach President Trump. That's what this is really all about today. Now, a few questions. On page 103 of Volume 2 of your report, when discussing the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting, you reference, quote, the firm that produced the Steele reporting, unquote. The name of that firm was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
And you're on page 103?
103, that's correct, Volume 2. When you talk about the firm that produced the Steele reporting, the name of the firm that produced that was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Let me just help you. It was. It's not a trick question. It was Fusion GPS. Now, Fusion GPS produced the opposition research document widely known as the Steele dossier, and the owner of Fusion GPA was someone named Glenn Simpson. Are you familiar with?
This is outside my purview.
Okay. Glenn Simpson was never mentioned in the 448-page Mueller report, was he?
Well, as I say, it's outside my purview, and it's being handled in the department by others.
Okay. Well, he was not. 448 pages. The owner of Fusion GPS that did the Steele dossier, that started all this, he's not mentioned in there. Let me move on. At the same time, Fusion GPS was working to collect opposition research on Donald Trump from foreign sources on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. It also was representing a Russian-based company, Prevazon, which had been sanctioned by the U.S. government. Are you aware of that?
It's outside my purview.
Okay, thank you. One of the key players I'll go to something different. One of the key players in the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting was Natalia Wisniewska, who you described in your report as a Russian attorney who advocated for the repeal of the Magnitsky Act. Wisniewska had been working with none other than Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS since at least early 2014. Are you aware of that?
Outside my purview.
Thank you. But you didn't mention that or her connections to Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS in your report at all. Let me move on. Now, NBC News has reported the following. Quote, Russian lawyer Natalia Wisniewska says she first received the supposedly incriminating information she brought to Trump Tower describing alleged tax evasion and donation to Democrats from none other than Glenn Simpson, the Fusion GPS owner. You didn't include that in the report, and I assume you're saying that was
the matter being handled by others at the Department of Justice.
Okay, thank you. Now, your report spends 14 pages discussing the June 9th, 2016 Trump Tower meeting. It would be fair to say, would it not, that you spent significant resources investigating that meeting?
Well, I refer you to the report.
Okay, and President Trump wasn't at the meeting?
No,
You're aware
he was not.
Thank you. Now, in stark contrast to the actions of the Trump campaign, we know that the Clinton campaign did pay Fusion GPS to gather dirt on the Trump campaign from persons associated with foreign governments. But your report doesn't mention a thing about Fusion GPS in it, and you didn't investigate Fusion GPS's connections to Russia. So let me just ask you this. Can you see that from neglecting to mention Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS's involvement with the Clinton campaign, to focusing on a brief meeting at the Trump Tower that produced nothing, to ignoring the Clinton campaign's own ties to Fusion GPS, why some view your report as a pretty one-sided attack on the president?
Well, I tell you, it is still outside my purview.
All right. And I would just note finally that I guess it's just by chance, by coincidence, that the things left out of the report tended to be favorable to the president. My time's expired.
All right, there we have the Republicans speaking, and Mueller's demeanor very different when the Republicans question him as opposed to the Democrats. You're listening to complete coverage of Robert Mueller's testimony on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM with Kevin Miller in the morning. Now back to Congressman Johnson of Georgia.
Supposed conflicts of interest, isn't that correct?
True.
Now, you had no conflicts of interest that required your removal, isn't that a fact?
So correct.
And in fact, Don McGahn advised the president that the asserted conflicts were, in his words, silly and not real conflicts. Isn't that true?
I refer to the report on that episode.
Well, page 85 of Volume 2 speaks to that. And also, Director Mueller, DOJ ethics officials confirmed that you had no conflicts that would prevent you from serving as special counsel. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
But despite Don McGahn and the Department of Justice guidance, around May 23, 2017, the president, quote, prodded McGahn to complain to Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein about these supposed conflicts of interest, correct?
Correct.
And McGahn declined to call Rosenstein, telling the president that it would look like still trying to meddle in the investigation and knocking out Mueller would be another fact used to claim obstruction of justice. Isn't that correct?
Generally so, yes.
And in other words, Director Mueller, the White House counsel told the president that if he tried to remove you, that could be another basis to allege that the president was obstructing justice, correct?
That is generally correct, yes.
Now, I'd like to review what happened after the president was warned about obstructing justice. On Tuesday,
I'm sorry, Congressman, do you have a citation for the...
Yes, Volume 2, page 81.
Thank you.
And 82. Now, I'd like to review what happened after the president was warned about obstructing justice. It's true that on Tuesday, June 13th, 2017, the president dictated a press statement stating he had, quote, no intention of firing you, correct?
Correct.
But the following day, June 14th, the media reported for the first time that you were investigating the president for obstructing of justice, correct?
Correct.
And then, after learning for the first time that he was under investigation, the very next day, the president, quote, issued a series of tweets acknowledging the existence of the obstruction investigation and criticizing it. Isn't that correct?
Generally so.
And then, on Saturday, June 17th, 2 days later, the president called Don McGahn at home from Camp David on a Saturday to talk about you. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
What was the significant about that first weekend phone call that Don McGahn took from President Trump?
Well, I'm going to ask you to rely on what we wrote about those.
Well, you wrote in your report that at page 85, volume 2, that on Saturday, June 17, 2017, the president called McGahn at home to have the special counsel removed. Now, did the president call Don McGahn more than once that day?
Well, I gave...
I think it was 2 calls.
I'm sorry about that.
On page 85 of your report, you wrote, quote, on the first call, McGahn recalled that the president said something like, quote, you got to do this, you got to call Rod, correct?
Correct.
And your investigation and report found that Don McGahn was perturbed, to use your words, by the president's request to call Rod Rosenstein to fire him. Isn't that correct?
Well, there was a continuous colloquy. It was a continuous involvement of Don McGahn in responding to the president's entreaties.
And he did not want to put himself in the middle of that. he did not want to have a role in asking the Attorney General to fire the special counsel, correct?
Well, I would again refer you to the report and the way it is characterized in the report.
Thank you. At volume 2, page 85, it states that he didn't want to have the Attorney General, he didn't want to have a role in trying to fire the Attorney General. So at this point, I will yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we continue on with our coverage. KIDO Talk Radio. Robert Mueller testifying before the House of Representatives.
This article, Robert Mueller unmasked, for the record.
Without objection.
Now, Mr. Mueller, who wrote the 9-minute comments you read at your May 29th press conference?
I'm not going to get into that.
Okay, so that's what I thought. You didn't write it. A 2013 puff piece in the Washingtonian about Comey said basically when Comey called, you drop everything you were doing. It gave examples. You're having dinner with your wife and daughter. Comey calls, you drop everything and go. The article quoted Comey as saying, if a train were coming down the track, and I quote, at least Bob Mueller will be standing on the tracks with me. You and James Comey have been good friends, or were good friends for many years, correct?
We were business associates. We both started off in the Justice Department about this
You were good
time.
friends. You can work together and not be friends, but you and Comey were friends.
We were friends.
That's my question. Thank you for getting to the answer. Now, before you were appointed as special counsel, had you talked to James Comey in the preceding 6 months?
No.
When you were appointed as special counsel, was President Trump's firing of Comey something you anticipated investigating, potentially obstruction of justice?
I'm not going to get into that. That's internal deliberations in the Justice Department.
Actually, it goes to your credibility, and maybe you've been away from the courtroom for a while. Credibility is always relevant. It's always material, and that goes for you, too. You're a witness before us. Let me ask you, when you talked to President Trump the day before he appointed you, or you were appointed as special counsel, you were talking to him about FBI director position again. Did he mention the firing of James Comey?
Not as a candidate. I was asked.
Did he mention the firing of James Comey in your discussion with him?
Cannot remember.
Pardon?
Cannot remember. Don't believe so, but I'm not going to be specific.
You don't remember. But if he did, you could have been a fact witness as to the president's comments and state of mind on firing James Comey.
I suppose that's possible.
Yeah. So most prosecutors want to make sure there's no appearance of impropriety. But in your case, you hired a bunch of people that did not like the president. Let me ask you, when did you first learn of Peter Strzok's animus toward Donald Trump?
In the summer of 2017.
You didn't know before he was hired?
I'm sorry?
You didn't know before he was hired for your team?
Know what?
Peter Strzok hated Trump.
Okay.
You didn't know that before he was made part of your team. Is that what you're saying?
I did not know that.
All right. When did you first learn?
When he did find out, I acted swiftly to have him reassigned elsewhere in the FBI.
Well, there's some discussion about how swift that was. But when did you learn of the ongoing affair he was having with Lisa Page?
About the same time I learned from Strzok.
Did you ever order anybody to investigate the deletion of all of their texts off of their government phones?
Once we found that Peter Strzok was an author of...
Did you ever...
May I finish?
Well, you're not answering my question. Did you order an investigation into deletion and reformatting your government phones?
No, there was an IG investigation ongoing.
Well, listen, regarding collusion or conspiracy, you didn't find evidence of any agreement, I'm quoting you, among the Trump campaign officials and any Russia-linked individuals to interfere with our U.S. election, correct?
Correct.
So you also note in the report that an element of any of those obstructions you referenced requires a corrupt state of mind, correct?
Corrupt intent, correct.
Right. And if somebody knows they did not conspire with anybody from Russia to affect the election, and they see the big Justice Department with people that hate that person coming after them, and then a special counsel appointed who hires dozen or more people that hate that person, and he knows he's innocent. He's not corruptly acting in order to see that justice is done. What he's doing is not obstructing justice. He is pursuing justice. And the fact that you ran it out 2 years means you perpetuated injustice.
I take your
Gentleman's
question.
time has expired. The witness may answer the question.
I take your question.
The gentleman from Florida.
There we have it. So here's another lib. So we're going to give you a break. The libs are, well, in cahoots with Mueller. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And our coverage of the Mueller hearing continues. KIDO Talk Radio. This is Congresswoman Martha Roby of Alabama.
Congress and the public. When you submitted your report to the Attorney General, did you deliver a redacted version of the report so that he would be able to release it to Congress and the public without delay, pursuant to his announcement of his intention to do so during his confirmation hearing?
I'm not going to engage in discussion about what happened after the production of our report.
Had the Attorney General asked you to provide a redacted version of the report?
We worked on the redacted versions together.
Did he ask you for a version where the grand jury material was separated?
Not going to get into details.
Is it your belief that an unredacted version of the report could be released to Congress or the public?
That's not within my purview.
All right, You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go to traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. And back to Mueller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Special counsel's investigation.
With regard to the president or generally?
No, generally.
Attorney General?
At Attorney General Barr's confirmation hearing, he made it clear that he intended to release your report to the public. Do you remember how much of your report had been written at that point?
Do not.
Were there significant changes in tone or substance of the report made after the announcement that the report would be made available to Congress and the public?
I can't get into that.
During the Senate testimony of Attorney General William Barr, Senator Kamala Harris asked Mr. Barr if he had looked at all the underlying evidence that the special counsel's team had gathered. He stated that he had not. So I'm going to ask you, did you personally review all of the underlying evidence gathered in your investigation?
Well, to the extent that it came through the special counsel's office, yes.
Did any single member of your team review all the underlying evidence gathered during the course of your investigation?
As has been recited here today, a substantial amount of work was done, whether it be search warrants or
My point is there was no one member of the team that looked at everything.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. It's fair to say that in an investigation as comprehensive as yours, it's normal that different members of the team would have reviewed different sets of documents, and few, if anyone, would have reviewed all of the underlying.
Thank you, yes.
How many of the approximately 500 interviews conducted by the special conference did you attend personally?
Very few.
On March 27, 2019, you wrote a letter to the Attorney General essentially complaining about the media coverage of your report. You wrote, and I quote, "The summary letter the department sent to Congress and released to the public late in the afternoon of March 24 did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office work and conclusions. We communicated that concern to the department on the morning of March 25th. There is now public confusion about critical aspects of the result of our investigation." Who wrote that March 27th letter?
Well, I can't get into who wrote it, the internal deliberation.
But you signed it.
What I will say is the letter stands for itself.
Okay. Why did you write a formal letter since you had already called the Attorney General to express those concerns?
I can't get into that, internal deliberations.
Did you authorize the letters released to the media, or was it leaked?
I have no knowledge on either.
Well, you went nearly 2 years without a leak. Why was this letter leaked?
I can't get into it.
Was this letter written and leaked for the express purpose of attempting to change the narrative about the conclusions of your report? And was anything in Attorney General Barr's letter referred to as principal conclusions inaccurate?
The time of the gentlelady has expired.
Can he answer the question, please?
And the question is?
Yes, you may answer the question.
Was anything in Attorney General Barr's letter referred to as the principal conclusions letter dated March 24th inaccurate?
Well, I am not going to get into that.
Time of the gentlelady is expired.
All right, you're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.